Hi everyone, our project is on fostering community solar for a just energy transition in Colombia and California. My name's Amy.
I'm Fiorella.
I'm Audrey.
I'm Yesenia.
I'm Madison.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Carol.
To give a brief overview about our project, it's a student-led project funded by the 100K Klima Grant, and it's a collaboration between two research groups, UCLA, CCSC, and EIA University located in Medellin. And we are conducting a comparative case study between two community solar projects, one La Stretcha in Medellin and the other in Los Angeles, the Bassett Avocado Heights Energy Community, or called BASE. To give a definition that was used for our project, it's a solar electric system that provides power and or financial benefit to multiple voluntary households in a predetermined geographic area. And this is important to make renewable energy sources accessible to disadvantaged communities, provide financial benefits, and also help advance social equity. To give a more simple definition, according to this diagram, imagine you and your neighbors have solar panels located on a park building, for example, and then you all get to share the financial benefits because you send electricity back to the grid. So that's essentially what community solar is, as illustrated by this diagram. So BASE is located about 45 minutes away from here, and importantly for this project, the solar panels aren't actually located on top of the roofs of the households. They're located about 5 miles away on top of an extra space storage facility. And this is different from the La Stretcha project because in this project located in Medellin, the solar panels are located on top of the roofs of the households themselves. And these maps were created by our GS lead, Madison.
The guiding question for our research project is what can we learn through the comparison of these two pilot projects in both Bassett Avocado Heights Advanced Energy Community and the La Stretcha Energy Community. Through the lens of cultural differences and neighborhood siting, we were able to formulate our approach to include interviewing key stakeholders, conducting field visits, and document analysis. All of our research culminated in a final deliverable of a report that synthesized our findings. To expand more upon our methodology, we took a three-pronged approach to a qualitative research process. We began by analyzing documents that gave us a strong foundational understanding of the history and significance of community solar projects. We then visited both Colombia and California solar projects to really understand firsthand the inner workings of these projects. And then we interviewed key stakeholders from both the solar providers, from the utility companies, and key researchers from both EIA and UCLA. However, we were not without our own challenges. Our funding did happen to fall under the U.S. Department of State, which means that as of January of this year, we were made aware of restrictions against terminologies that fall under the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility umbrella. What does this mean? That means that we had to take out key and quite possibly necessary terms that made up our project goals. These include, but are not limited to, solar, energy, renewable energy, clean energy, diverse communities, low-income communities, and climate change or climate crisis. So as you can see, we've been having a great time.
And now for our findings. So in the project planning phase, both projects were initiated by institutional partners rather than communities asking for these solar initiatives themselves. In La Stretcha, community involvement was paramount because it built trust between community members and project partners. BASE, on the other hand, in Los Angeles, was structured according to stricter regulatory requirements and was largely planned by institutional partners. Community members were drawn in by being offered a 20% discount on their energy bill, but beyond that, their engagement was limited to their subscription. After the projects began, though Colombian utility companies managed the more technical aspects of the project and the maintenance of the panels, La Stretcha's prioritization of community engagement and energy literacy meant that the project could develop into a collaborative rooftop solar initiative. And that collaboration became necessary when certain challenges popped up, like necessary roof repairs and navigating an uncertain regulatory environment. But for BC, an individualized model emerged because they used virtual net metering, meaning that the community had no direct connection to the solar panels that were about 5 miles away. And moving on to post-implementation, interestingly, after interviewing utility stakeholders in both places, there seems to be no long-term sustainability plan for when the panels are at the end of their life for recycling, decommissioning, or otherwise. In La Estrecha, the community now owns the solar panels after having put down their own money, and that has created a greater sense of environmental consciousness and how their project has contributed to renewable energy in Colombia. And because we were not able to interview BASI participants, we couldn't make the same conclusion, but we do know that the hands-off approach in Los Angeles was easier for members to participate in because their time commitment was low.
And now I'm just going to take a second to discuss some of the discussion points that we established in our report. For us, a major point that we established was the idea of success being varied and context dependent. In the La Estrecha project, the idea of success really comes from the fact they were able to establish a community project in which community pride was paramount. Whereas in the BASI project, we can also define it as success as they were able to establish renewable, clean, and affordable energy for a disadvantaged community in Los Angeles, California. While the pride and personal element makes La Estrecha unique, it begs the question as to whether or not these types of projects are scalable. While projects like BASI may be easier to scale, we do lose that element of community, green energy, and the establishment for environmental interest in community members. When considering project innovations, we must also think about the idea that BASI is ultimately an economic-centered project. As it is a project for low-income utility, as it's a low-income utility project, we find that that makes it an economically centered project overall. Whereas the La Estrecha project did have economic incentives as well, the idea of environmental interest also became paramount as the project continued. Moving on, we also have the idea of the fact that these are both research projects with university and utility stakeholders involved. Because of this, there's an incentive to not allow these projects to ultimately fail because we would like to draw results from them. In future projects, it's important that we establish community as a center with their wants and needs at the forefront. As we move forward, a pressing question really becomes, how do we harness the potential of community energy projects? Community energy cannot be copy-pasted and dropped, as we can see from our two different projects. They both had different approaches, different results, and in the end, they still managed to make it a success. And since we are only looking at two specific projects, ultimately, we cannot say whether or not this is an overall encompassing idea about community solar. Further, we're going to need to do further research and further discussion in order to actually come to conclusions about the state of community solar in society. So essentially what we're saying is that our research is telling us to probably do more research.
First off, I'm going to say thank you, and if you feel inclined to learn more about our research project, this is the QR code to our final report, so if you're interested, you can feel free to scan it. And we also just want to say a special thank you to our advisors, Rob, Sebastian, and Sam, for all the help.
We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, team. That was wonderful. And I don't think it would probably be research if we couldn't suggest more research. Well, not on that front. Any questions for the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how like community ownership works in Colombia, where the solar panels, and as I understand, are on individual roofs. Like, does everybody take care of everybody's, or do people take care of their own?
Yeah, so they actually created a nonprofit of the neighborhood. It's called the La Estrecha Community Energy Company, and then their company, their nonprofit owns the panels, and all the financial benefit goes to one place.
Okay.
Yes.
They also split the price. All the community members split the price to buy back the community solar, so that's why they all share the responsibility because everyone pitched in to buy back.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So thanks. Another question, yeah.
Yeah, so Colombia and California are very different political, social, in all ways, environments. Do you think that the model in Colombia would work in another part of LA? And do you think the LA models would work, you know, in Bogota?
That is the question we've been asking ourselves for the entire year. But ultimately, we came to the conclusion that the context of the Columbia project was so specific, not only to Columbia, but to the specific neighborhood that it was in. One of the community members was an accountant, another one was a lawyer. They had a lot of like innate knowledge already, and that's really, really hard to replicate. But the kind of close-knitness could be replicated elsewhere. I don't think that's specific to Columbia or anywhere. I think it's just to the neighborhood. And then Basie's model requires really complex regulatory structures, and Colombia is currently writing new legislation to make their legislation more robust. So I think after that goes into effect, it would be easier to replicate the LA model in Colombia, but it depends on like more of a regulatory environment.
Thanks.
Thanks, team. Great, nice job.